Hey everyone, my name is Marvin and I like every type of art. Today we're making Hackclaw from the game Delta Force. Delta Force is pretty popular right now. One of those first-person shooter built on the same kind as Battlefield. And yeah, I might have sunk a few hours into it myself, purely for research purpose, of course. First things first, as always I need my trusty aluminium skeleton as the base for the figure. Then I pop open my plastic container filled with old scraps of clay and as usual start slapping on the first rough layers. At this stage, details are the last things on my mind. It's all about giving the figure some bulk and its basic shape. For that I cover the entire skeleton with layers of Super Sculpey. Next I sculpt Hackclaw's rather well defined ass. Yep, gotta get those cheeks in shape. Moving on to the boots. Starting with the upper section, I use a strip of clay, then I attach to the top of the boot and blended it into the lower part. This gives me a nice sharp edge for the shoe. After that I add the sole to the boot using my sculpting tool and keep refining the overall shape. With my smallest bow stylus tool, I carefully sculpt the holes into the laces. Then I roll out a long thin clay noodle, stick one end in the first hole and thread it upward just like a real shoelace. Then I repeat the entire process for the other foot, shaping it up followed by details and finishing touches. I added the holes on both sides and of course thread the shoelace, because why should one foot get all the attention, right? Next I give the pant that denim-like texture by pressing a cotton cloth firmly onto the surface. Fancy, right? After that it's time to add some details and folds to the pants. For the folds I roll out tiny clay worms and blend them into the pants using my fingers and sculpting tools. Once that's done, I repeat the process to add a few creases around the knees. Because no pair of pants is complete with some dramatic knee action. Finally I smooth the entire surface with isopropyl alcohol, blending everything together like the clay sheaf I aspire to be. Now it's time to layer on some more clay pieces over the torso to build up mass in this area. The torso needs to get a lot thicker because Hackclaw is rocking a jacket. After adding enough clay I blend the surface using my fingers and trusty wooden tool. Next with my needle tool I start adding the first folds to the jacket. Most of these go around the arms with a few placed on the front for good measure. Then as always I smooth the surface again with my brush and isopropyl alcohol, because nothing says perfectionist like over smoothing. Moving on, I roll out a thin sheet of clay using my pasta machine and cut out the first half of Hackclaw's vest. For that I use my trusty hobby knife. I attach the first half of the vest to Hackclaw's torso and using a bit of baking bond add a small clay pocket to the front of the vest. Something I made off camera because I'm nothing if not mysterious. With my needle tool I sculpt the pocket seams directly into the surface. Next the pockets get a little patch made from thin clay, which also gets some neat stitching details. Then I attach the second half of the vest to the back of the torso and connect the two halves together like some sort of clay sandwich. Moving on I add a thin clay strap around the tight, followed by a vertical strap that connects to a belt and keeps the lower strap in place. These straps are getting serious now. Hackclaw also gets two small knives and a bracket attached to the straps. Yeah, I made those off camera too because apparently I like keeping you in suspense. The pocket on the front of the vest gets an upgrade with two tiny throwing knives, because why not make it even cooler. Next I give Hackclaw's impressive posterior its back pockets, sculpting them directly into the clay using my trusty sculpting tool. Now it's time to craft Hackclaw's weapon. For this I found a picture of an AVM online, printed it out and cut it out with my hobby knife. This serves as my stencil. I lay it on a rolled out sheet of clay and carefully cut along the contours to shape the weapon. Next I try to transfer the finer details from my stencil onto the clay gun. Using my sculpting tools I shave off some clay here and there, refine the shape, carve in some details and sculpt the grip, the front barrel section, the shoulder stock and even the little trigger guard. At this point my camera battery decided to quit on me, which of course I didn't notice, so off camera I added a toothpick for the barrel, a small clay cylinder for the suppressor and even made a scope to top it all off. After that I take a rectangular piece of clay, roll it out to an even thickness and slice it into two halves with my hobby knife. These will become the two pockets that got on Hackclaw's back. Off camera, because I like to keep you guessing, I added some fancy details to the pockets, and now I attach them to her back. Our figure gets another small pocket on her bed. This one holds a radio and her gadget for tracking enemies, because every hero needs their high-tech toys. Now it's time to sculpt the first hand for our figure. I grab a piece of clay with my trusty hobby knife, slice it into 5 fingers. Then I use my sculpting tools and my own fingers to round and shape them until they look like an actual hand. We're close enough. Once that's done, I attach the hand to the left arm and position it so it can properly hold the rifle, because having a floppy non-functional arm isn't exactly intimidating. Now let's move on to Hackclaw's head. I roll a small ball of clay and, with my fingers, shape it into a slightly oval form. I then stick this onto a piece of wire, which will serve as a support and later be used for the neck. Using my sculpting tool, I mark out the facial features and start shaping the eyes, eyebrows and nose. Once I'm happy with that, I attach the head to the body and blend the two together for a nice smooth transition. For the mask Hackclaws wear, I grab a thin triangular piece of clay, which I attach to her face and shape it with my hobby knife. Then I carve out the 3 breathing slits in the mask and add 2 small round discs to represent the mask filters. Now I piece together Hackclaw's hair from several clay parts. I shape small strands and chunks of hair, attaching them one after the other to the head and blending them together. Then I grab my sculpting tools to add some finer strands into the hair pieces. Oh, and of course I can't forget the little braided strand. It's all about the details. Next I roll out the long pieces of clay and wrap it around Hackclaw's neck. This will become the scarf she wears in the game. I shape it with my fingers, adjusting it until it looks just right. Finally, we've made it to the painting job. First I paint all the exposed skin areas in a nice skin tone, starting with the arms and face. Next I move on to the pants, covering them entirely black. Gotta make sure I don't miss a spot, we're aiming for a full coverage here. After that I paint Hackclaw's boots in a dark grey tone. The AVM sniper rifle gets a full coat of black primer, since that's the base color. Hackclaw's gloves also get a black treatment, as does the mask on her face. To add some variation and make things pop, I give both objects a lighter grey dry brush. Then I finally get around to painting the torso to match the arms and face with the same skin tone. The belts and all of the Hackclaw's many pockets get a green base coat, followed by a lovely olive green layer for the tactical vibe. Hackclaw's hair, naturally, it's get a signature bright white. The eyes are painted black at first. This makes it easier to add the white later while leaving a thin black edges for the lashes. Save time and sanity. Finally, the hair gets a grey dry brush to add some variation. The rifle also gets its classic AVM olive green elements. For the finishing touch I use my brush to add tiny silver highlights to the edges of the weapon, making it look like the paint has chipped off a bit from wear and tear. Next, Hackclaw's jacket gets a water blue base coat. This will serve as a main color for the camouflage pattern I'm about to create. I start by using a fine brush to paint small grey geometric patches all over the jacket. These form the first layer of the camo design. After that I repeat the process with a light blue and then again with a white tone. There's no real method to the madness here. I just randomly apply the colors across the surface until it starts to look like the pattern on the original jacket. Next I prime the entire scarf in white, which will soon get its fancy pattern. Using my smallest board stylus tool, I add a tiny brown iris to each of Hackclaw's eyes. Because the eyes are the windows to the soul, even if your soul is a video game sniper. Then I paint Hackclaw's fingernail, alternating between white and purple for the chic battlefield look. Moving back to the scarf, I use my brush to paint black stripes across it, repeating the pattern at regular intervals. Once the scarf is covered in these horizontal stripes from top to bottom, I switch to a finer brush and add little arrow-like patterns in the gaps, filling the entire surface with this intricate design. With the painting job finally done, our figures still need one last thing, a beautiful base. For this I grab some styrofoam. Using my trusty craft knife, I've cut out a rectangular piece in the right size and clean up the edges with a bit of sandpaper. Next I cut 2 smaller pieces from the styrofoam sheet. These will serve as a rock and a support for Hackclaw's food. Naturally, the pieces also get the sandpaper treatment. Once they're nice and smooth but not too smooth, I glue them together with hot glue and start working on the surface with a rock. Yep, a literal rock. This step is to give the styrofoam a stone-like texture, or at least that's the plan. Since my rock decided to be too smooth and round to make a convincing texture, I switched to my craft knife to roughen up the surface even more. Once I'm happy with it, I glue the pieces onto the base. I then coated the base with a paste from Mod Podge, gap filler and a bit of paint, brushing it on and letting it dry overnight. Once it's all set, I grab my airbrush and prime the entire surface of the base in a nice dirty brown tone. Next comes the green paint for the spots where some grass will be growing, like the top of the small rocks and a few patches on the base's ground. After the paint dries, I brush those green areas with some wood glue because it's time to add grass. I load up my static grass applicator with 2mm grass flock, clip the wire to the sides of the base and let the grass rain down onto the surface. Thanks to the magic of physics, the grass stand upright, looking much better than if I had just sprinkled it on by hand, leaving it to awkwardly lie flat. To mix things up a bit, I repeat the process with 5mm grass flocks for some variation. Then, all that's left is to attach Hackclaw to the base, paint the edges of the base in black, and we're ready. Time for the final reveal. That's it for this video. As always, a massive thank you to everyone who stuck around until the end. You're the real MVPs, the one who keep this channel going. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the video and my channel get noticed on YouTube. With that, I say goodbye and see you next time. Bye.